Hello and welcome to the Ghibli Rewatch series of the Overly Animated Podcast, where we'll be going through every Studio Ghibli movie chronologically from the beginning. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Delaney Stovall.
Hey, y'all.
And Alex Bonilla.
Hello.
Join us in rewatching or watching for the first time all the Studio Ghibli movies now that they're available for streaming for the first time ever on HBO Max in the United States and Netflix in most of the rest of the world. We'll have new podcasts every Wednesday as we go through the whole Ghibli catalog chronologically. Find everything about us and our contact information at overlyanimated.com. I'm a Ghibli expert joined by co-hosts with a variety of Ghibli experience. Today is Ponyo. I'm excited to talk about everything about Ponyo. There will be full spoilers for Ponyo in this podcast and only minor spoilers for the rest of the Ghibli catalog. We'll be discussing both the subs and the dubs, maybe primarily the subs, but watch whatever you prefer. That is fine for listening to this discussion. So it's time for Ponyo, also known as Ponyo on the Cliff by the Sea. I guess I thought that was the official title, but I don't really know what really counts. We'll go with Ponyo. We're in 2008 now for our next Hayao Miyazaki film, his follow-up to Howl's Moving Castle. This is more of a maybe younger children aimed film for him, although we'll discuss that. It's partly inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, among a few other things from Japanese culture and elsewhere. We'll talk about some of them. This film was fairly well received and a success worldwide now that Miyazaki movies are being shown largely across the world at this point. And definitely was a success in Japan, as with all of his films at this point. And Ponyo remains the 11th highest grossing movie ever in Japan. A lot of, I think, interesting things we can talk about with Ponyo, including its incredible animation, the fantasy elements in it, but let's hear what each of our histories are with Ponyo and what we think of the film. Delaney is newer to some of these Ghibli movies, but not to Ponyo. I know she's been very excited to talk about Ponyo for a while, so tell us about Ponyo, Delaney.
So Ponyo, I was part of some of my first honestly the only selection I had watched before we started this series, and Ponyo was definitely hands down my favorite. I watched Ponyo several years ago and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't really understand what was going on, which I didn't really understand that I didn't understand what was going on until I watched it this time. And I was like, oh, I got a lot more out of it this time. Granted, I was also in high school when I watched it the first time, so it's been a while. I love Ponyo. The movie's adorable. I was really excited. I know it's not everybody's favorite. And I was like, I am so ready to talk about Ponyo. This movie's adorable. And it's really funny because I don't really the only other movie really you can compare this to other than obviously the rest of the Ghibli catalog, would be Disney's The Little Mermaid. And I hate that movie. Oh, no. I don't like it at all. So I love this movie. And I think it's a great, I can't even say retelling. It's a different telling of The Little Mermaid, and I just really enjoy it. This movie's it's so cute, and I think it is one of the, I think, better examples of Ghibli art. Mm. It's just so bright, and then it's also, this movie is very interesting thematically. It's for such a cute and uplifting film. It's also very dark and scary at times, but I really enjoyed this movie a lot, and I was really excited to watch it the second time. And I definitely think you have to watch this movie twice, because at first you're like, I have no idea what's going on.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think you summarized some of definitely some points we're going to hit on. And interesting, Ponyo, a movie with its complexities that needs to be rewatched. You may not think of that immediately, but I think that's definitely true in some ways. I feel like Alex has also been very excited to talk about Ponyo, so I would be interested in hearing his history with this movie and why that is.
Well, the thing is, I didn't really have a history of this movie. I just know it because of the memes. I love Ham, and those 4-panel comics with Ponyo Loves Revolution and stuff. So I just knew that there was a cute fish person, and that's kind of it. I didn't really know. I didn't know it was going to be based on The Little Mermaid. I didn't know that it was going to be totally hand drawn despite CGI in previous movies. I didn't know any of that. So I did know that it was supposed to be a more more kid-oriented movie, so I did come in with that expectation at least. And watching it for the first time this week, I will say that it was a very relaxing movie to watch, which I really enjoyed. It was very comforting in a weird way. Just like the absolute wholesomeness of Ponyo and Sosuke. Like seeing them, like, you know, just hang out together being kids, like it hits it, at least to me, a lot more effectively than Totoro does. I feel like Totoro is one that gets compared with this as well, since it's like the other movie with focused on two very small kids. And for whatever I mean, we'll talk about it and maybe we can work through it, but like this relationship between two young children worked a lot better on me. I love the imagery. I love the you know, the ocean stuff. I mean, from the very beginning, like you take like the 5 minutes to just like show off, like I can do jellyfish and fit and like this kind of fish, these big fish, and like introduction to Ponyo and her little sister fishies. So, like, and the design of the wizard dad is really good. Giant woman in the middle of the movie kind of took me for a surprise. And mom is great. So like there's like a lot of different things I can praise about each of the characters, and I think that's like a really important thing, that like even though like there's like an antagonist or like there's a thing propelling the plot, it never feels like a villain is around, and I appreciate that, especially for something that is as fairy tale inspired as this. Like it always feels, you know, kind of calm, and like everybody has their reasons for doing things.
The dad's the villain. What are you talking about?
Well, we'll get to that. But like, I never really got that vibe out of him, and I appreciated that fact that it always felt very low stakes. I can imagine that annoys some people who are like, yeah, like I know nothing bad's gonna happen, but I find a comfort in that kind of movie. So like, I really liked this movie a lot. I thought it was really fun. I think that if you begin picking at the why of certain things happening, it'll probably fall apart. But I think that it's more about the atmosphere of this movie, and in that sense, this movie it sells. So like that's what I want to highlight out of this experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of that last part there with Ponyo's appeals. The dad, I think, probably presented as the villain for like 2/3 of the movie, but then there's like a pretty big shift. And
yeah,
as I think is typical, we've seen with some Miyazaki quote unquote villains, they are pulled into the sympathetic light pretty quickly, which I think is an appealing aspect of these films for a lot of people. Yeah, so for me with Ponyo, I think I referenced this on one of the previous podcasts. So it's like when I'm getting into all the Ghibli films, I'd seen a few before, but when I'm around like 13 or 14, I get really into them. I watch all of them. I'm really excited because Ponyo is going to be the first Miyazaki movie that comes out that I can see like in real time at this point. So I go to see Ponyo in theaters, very excited. Probably not like right as it's going to be later coming out in the US versus Japan, but hadn't seen it. And I was definitely disappointed, I think, compared to previous Miyazaki movies. So that was like my reaction as a kid. And that's, I think, indicative of some people's reactions to Ponyo. If you're expecting Spirited Away or something, it's not this. Watching it now, revisiting Ponyo, I definitely have a far greater appreciation for this movie. I think that this is one of the most gorgeous, beautiful movies ever made, like animation wise. I was floored by the animation, as has been the case with several of these Ghibli movies that I think are underappreciated, but just cannot believe what Ponyo accomplishes animation wise. I also do think this movie is fairly magical. If you're like, how much these later Miyazaki movies do they retain his climactic magic, or some of these movies? I think Ponyo is fairly magical, not like quite as much as some of his best ones. I do think. I guess I want to compare a lot to Howl's Moving Castle. I feel pretty similarly to Howl'sMoving Castle that I do to Ponyo as I do to Howl's. In that, gorgeous movie, I think Ponyo is even more gorgeous. I think I'm pretty into the movie for kind of 2/3 of it, and I think like there's some core character moments that I think are really successful for me. I agree. Ponyo and Sosuke's relationship, I think, is incredible. I love their interactions. I love both of those characters. I love their interactions. I think the third act As previously been discussed, some Miyazaki movies have maybe a weakness in the third act. I feel this way about Kiki's. I feel this way definitely about Howl's, and I think I feel this way about Ponyo. I think its third act is a little bit hard to understand what's happening. And as is the whole movie, the mythology is very thin, but as Alex kind of talked about, it's not really about that. It's kind of about this core relationship with Ponyo and Sosuke and these characters, and Ponyo becoming human, and just like the general incredible animation and atmosphere that's going on. So I don't think the story of the third act detracts so much. And I think there's a lot really to like about the ending too, in terms of the strong aspects of the movie. So I was surprised that if you've listened to a lot of these podcasts, I like all these movies that more than I previously did. So I shouldn't be surprised about that. But Ponyo, the Miyazaki ones I've examined more closely, and I did really like Ponyo a lot more. I don't think it is lesser than all the rest of the Miyazaki movies anymore. I think it is right there with Howl's Moving Castle, maybe a step below all of his previous ones, but you could certainly argue it's right there with any of them. I'm excited to talk about the animation, honestly. I think that's one of my biggest topic for this one, but also I think there's a lot of interesting aspects of Ponyo that will be interesting to dive into to whatever extent we are able to. Because I don't know that thinking about talking about Ponyo, it's like, where's the depth? What aspects of Ponyo are going to have the depth that we're going to really dive into in a discussion? So I think it's going to be. I'm interested to see what we kind of focus on here with the movie. Delaney, out of kind of these topics that have been raised, I guess, like what's for you is what's jumping out at you as something you're most eager to talk about, well, as a Ponyo lover.
Yes, I kind of want to be in the defense of Ponyo, because there's a lot, you get that a lot from people. Like even me, when I'm not as familiar with Ghibli, and I think the reason people don't like Ponyo is also it isn't just a Miyazaki thing. Like I think this is a general issue with some kinds of stories in animation, and kind of relating to some of our coverage of the rebooted Powerpuff Girls. There's this
I didn't expect that comparison.
There's this idea that just because something bad doesn't happen, it's not a story worth telling. And that's not strictly true. And it is funny though, on my first watch of Ponyo, I was just so stressed out that Lisa was dead the whole movie. Also, she can't drive. It's terrifying. I fear for Lisa the whole movie. Granted, now when I watched it the second time, I was I know how it ends, so I was just grinning the whole movie because it's so sweet and adorable, and it's just a fun, uplifting film. I don't know why we all have to be sad all the time. By the way, for more context, the group of films I watched when I was in high school was Grave of the Fireflies,
yes,
Ponyo, Spirited Away, and one other one. And I was like, okay, so this is where we're at.
It's a representative group of movies, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. So this is Ponyo's there's not, to me, it's why would you say that Ponyo is any lesser than the other Miyazaki films? Is Nausicaa my favorite? Yes. Is Ponyo up there? Yes. They tell very different stories, but again, you can't argue with the sheer beauty of Ponyo. And also, again, there is no CGI in this film. That's insane. What they do with the fish. I mean, when you start, you have no it's insane what's going on with all the fish and the jellyfish and Alex was saying, the sisters. And then one of the most iconic scenes in the film, and arguably one of the greatest scenes, I think, in any of the Miyazaki films, is when Ponyo is chasing after Sasuke on the waves. That's ridiculous. That entire sequence of her running on the fish is just... That's all hand-drawn. That's ridiculous. And, arguably, it's hard... it's hard to find current... this movie came out in 2008, but, current animation that these films hold up, and Ponyo continues to hold up. And when you talk about the plot, the mythology is bonkers, but it's definitely hard to follow the first time because you have no idea what's going on. But I would definitely say once you have a handle on the film, the mythology doesn't fall apart. They hold it's very thin, but they don't dip any farther than they need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly not like incomprehensible in any way. I think people wouldn't say the movie everyone talks about. I think to a certain extent that doesn't make too much sense would be Howl's Moving Castle, which is a big reason I compare. I don't think this movie gets into that realm of incomprehensibility. Although I think both movies have a very solid logic to them. I think Ponyo more so. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in that third act of mythology wise, which I do think is like there. I kind of understand, I guess, what's going on, but it's also pretty out there. I mean, you're bringing up a lot of points about the animation that I really agree with, Delaney, and I'm eager to get to that. But I think you were talking about the out there-ness, I think, of some of this stuff. We're talking about the lack of a villainous presence, but in some ways, this movie's more is darker and than maybe any of Miyazaki's previous movies. And also the other thing I wanted to say was we're referencing criticism of Ponyo a lot. This was a very well received movie, so people. Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to point to that is that, like, yes, you could say that this is maybe the like if you were ranking the Miyazaki movies, Ponyo being at the bottom is a case that you could make. But at the same time, the quality of every single movie on that list is such that the worst Miyazaki movie can still be better than a lot of animated movies from other places. So, like, I think it's important to know that, like, there's a difference between comparing Ponyo to other Miyazaki movies and just saying Ponyo is a bad movie. And at least the way that I get the sensation is that Ponyo is talked about as like kind of a tossed aside when discussing it in the Miyazaki canon. But I do think it's important to say as well, like Ponyo on its own is still like a really fun movie that can stand up with a lot of other movies out there. So I just think that there is like a bit of a distinction. Like saying it's the worst Miyazaki movie is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And I think that this is, in some ways, if you've heard us talking about the rest of these Miyazaki movies, this is a very apparent thing that, I think these are some of the greatest movies of all time. So saying Ponyo is Ponyo and Howl's, I think of them together currently in my mind. Saying it's like a slight step down from the greatest movies of all time is really not much of a criticism. Like, I loved Ponyo watching it this time. I do think some people think of it as much lesser than some of these movies, and revisiting it now, I would say that I don't agree with that. Like, I think there's a lot to really like here. We can get into some of those things, but yeah, I want to start to bring in quotes from, as always, Susan Napier's Miyazakiworld book. She's a lot about the interesting extreme elements in Ponyo, which I was wondering how we're going to work it in, but I think it's very related to what Delaney was talking about. So she says, apocalyptic imagery has invaded Miyazakiworld from as early as Future Boy Conan, yet the catastrophic events in Ponyo are perhaps the most distinctive and memorable in all of Miyazaki's oeuvre, a working through of trauma on a level that is both profound and expansive. The volatile narrative suggests an artist liberated from conventional narrative constraints and opening himself up to extremes. Howl's central theme of family or pseudo-family and love become more intense and exaggerated, a passionate quote-unquote romance between two 5-year-olds and a quote-unquote family of hundreds of fish whose mother is a sea goddess and whose once human father is a sea magician. Thematic and visual elements are extreme as well, suggesting a world in which things are literally falling apart. I didn't remember or even conceive of Ponyo as an apocalyptic movie, but it really is in the ending. Things go pretty cray at the end of Ponyo.
So I had told you before we started, I had read like half of the outline. Like I said, I don't like being spoiled. I remember reading that and being like, what? And then of course you watch the movie and I'm like, oh right, I forgot they like flood the planet. Like, and then, which something I missed out on the first time was the fact that like, not obviously she flooded the planet, but on top of that, like Ponyo was literally ending the world. So like I didn't get that the first time I watched it, because again, the third act, you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, they're like, the moon is too close to the planet, and
yeah,
and then, literally we were presented with this like gorgeous like seaside village, and then it almost entirely is flooded at the end of the movie.
And then there's also some really eerie scenes in the movie, like not just like one. But that's another thing. Another like really, also we get that environmentalism in Miyazaki's film, and I think this one actually might do a better job of getting the point across than Nausicaa, which is shocking. But because really we're seeing it in real time. So, I mean, the film opens up and there's just garbage like everywhere. And it's like, very much in stark contrast to this gorgeous animation of the fish in the water. And then like we just keep seeing the garbage, and then the waves turn very violent when Ponyo is on her way. And just this constant, like Lisa's constantly battling the ocean like throughout the whole time she's driving. And then there's, if you haven't seen the movie, there's like at least 30 minutes you're like, is Lisa dead? And then there is the extremely eerie scene of the park where all of everyone from the senior center is supposed to be, and the wheelchairs are empty. And you're like, oh my God. But then it's okay because they're all underwater. But it's these very eerie, like, we see, like, there's the park and the hotel that's at the peak, and then Sasuke's house, and that's it. Like, that's all the land we get for, like, the last half of the movie.
Related to this, so when I was younger and I'm not as crazy about Ponyo, in my head it's like, oh, Ponyo's this little kids movie. Miyazaki decided to make a little kids movie, and that's unappealing to me. But watching it this time, I mean, certainly I think there's elements of this, and it's about younger children. You could argue, I think maybe this, and I do think Totoro is a good comparison, or maybe aimed at younger children at its core, but there's definitely a lot of dark elements to this movie. I'll read Susan Napier's quote about this as like a more complex kids movie. She says, Ponyo's narrative is fairly simple, an archetypal romance in which a boy and a girl meet, endure complications, and go on to live happily ever after. Miyazaki then introduces a number of elements and themes not usually seen in a movie explicitly marketed for young children, including not only a child's eye view of apocalypse, but visions of aging, implications of death and a world beyond death, a call to arms on the environment, and finally, an implicit call for a utopia of tolerance, love, and acceptance. And I think if you've been following along the themes we've been tracking of all the Miyazaki movies in this series, all that stuff we've talked about at the end is pretty in line with what Miyazaki is going for. And I think just because this is in some ways more of a movie aimed at younger children, we do not lose these core Miyazaki themes, I think, that are hit upon in all of his movies. This, notions of wanting a more interconnected, empathetic society. This extreme environmentalism, I do think, is really present in Ponyo, and a large part of the kind of apocalyptic ending. And you add on to that this the themes of old age and aging and death, and that is, I think, striking compared to some of his earlier movies. The only one which I feel like really hits on that this kind of extent is Howl's Moving Castle, which also deals with kind of Sophie as an old woman and her thriving in older age in life. And so I think there really is a lot of meat on Ponyo's bones, the ham or something of the movie, right? Like, I think it's there really is, I think, a lot here. If you're looking for complexity, if you're looking for maturity, this is not just some simple little kids movie.
Well, the maturity that Sosuke shows, like, I mean, from the opening scene in the film, like, he is so empathetic, and he's just, and again, like, I mean, another very powerful scene in the film is when they find Lisa's car, and, Sosuke's calling for Lisa, and he, finally breaks down. Like, they've been on a boat, like, looking for his mom for hours, and that's, like, it's ridiculous. Like, there's all this magic, but he just wants his mom. And and Sasuke is also very much dealing with this fear that his mom's gone. He's like, but she can't be, she promised. So there's, I mean, even like the themes are there, but I mean, the characters are confronting them as well. And the comments are made about, whatever the love spell, not ritual nonsense, but, comments are made like when, I can't say his name. I don't remember his name. There's too many letters. The evil sea wizard.
Fujimoto.
Yes. I don't think they necessarily say his name until the end of the movie, even. But yeah. Yeah.
So Fujimoto, he's talking to. Does the sea goddess have a name? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a big reveal.
Mama Mare or something.
Oh yeah, she's like
Grand Mamare. Yeah, I didn't understand. It feels like a reveal, but it's like, okay, what does that mean that's her name?
Yeah. And well, I mean, it definitely, she's like the big mother. Like, that's basically what that means. And so when they're talking, and he's like, well, if he doesn't really love her, she'll turn into sea foam, and she's like, that's where we all come from. So there's definitely these very
That's a good point about that line. It plays into this like acceptance of the fate and death, kind of. Like...
And also it's kind of a funny juxtaposition, but we have like the senior center next to the kindergarten, and Sosuke spends all of his time there. And he doesn't really have friends at school. He's friends with the old ladies at the senior center, who are honestly one of the best parts of the film. By the way,
we'll talk about them. Yeah.
And then there's another scene when they're underwater in the bubble or whatever, that's when I think it's when Toki arrives, or it might be right before that, and they're like, oh no, I think it's before that. They're all like, wow, and they're running around, and they're like, is this the afterlife? And they're like, I don't care. Like,
yeah. And then that's pretty powerful, seeing them walk and grapple with their fate, I think, at that point.
And then when they come out and they're like, nope, we don't need our wheelchairs, we'll walk. But there's a lot going on. Like, I mean, and also there's also the big, before Ponyo like kind of comes back, a lot of the kind of, I don't want to say plot, but like there's like the central issue is that, well, first, Sosuke's dad's not coming home for dinner, but then it turns into, is he okay? We can't talk to him. We normally are able to communicate with him. And they're like, and even Sasuke is like, did all the ships sink?
Yeah, you're right about that. I didn't necessarily, I guess, because I remembered what happened, but you do wonder if the dad is dead. You wonder if the mom is dead for parts that, I think.
Well, that's the thing, because it was really stressful for me when I remember watching this movie for the first, and it was also funny. My wife was watching it for the first time with me. And she was like, would look at me, and I'm like, it's okay, because I didn't want her getting stressed, because like, grandmother characters dying is like not okay, and I was like, they're fine, the old ladies are fine, like, and so like, and she kept getting, and I was like, no, it's fine, but like, I mean, you're stressed like the whole movie, because it's a sweet happy ending, but you don't know that when you're watching it, and you see like the world flood, like it gets really stressful at times.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I want to say, like, I think that this is probably the biggest disservice of calling this a kids movie, in that if you go in with that preconception like I did, none of this really hits you in the way that I think you guys are describing it, because like we talk about, like it is apocalyptic imagery on its face, but because we're like doing this from the perspective of the kids who, like, for the most part, like just like seeing everything with wonder, it's like, oh, everything is so cool, like look, like the flood, you can like look down and see the fishies without any concern for like everything that got flooded by. Like, because it's treated in that way, it feels a lot lighter and manageable than something like Howls, which like also uses apocalyptic imagery, but in a much darker, like people are dying, like it's terrible. Like Ponyo doesn't really treat it that way, so like it definitely like softens the impact of that kind of stuff. Similarly with stuff like death, right? Like you have the scene of him like finding the car, but then like immediately cuts to us to like, hey, let's check on the old people's home, and we see them the old lady trying. It's like, okay, so like the dread of them being dead is cut very quickly, and I think that's the nature of this like aiming towards kids. Like we can do that feeling, but we can't let them sit in that for too long. Like, let's cut to make sure, like, okay, don't worry, they're fine. Now we can come back to the main characters. So like I think that's like kind of the push and pull with this. Like, I think that Miyazaki does want to like get his themes in there, but it does feel at the same time a little bit restrained because of the format of being focused on kids, in a way that like something like Grave of the Fireflies, which like also is two like main kid characters, but it doesn't, but because of the vibe of that movie, like it portrays everything so much more realistically, like it gets across a lot easier than it does in Ponyo, which is like trying to keep you like, this is a fantasy world, so don't worry too much about it, you know? So at least that's the way that I was experiencing the movie. And like you on the one hand, I like it because it makes me I'm not stressed out watching this movie, and sometimes I need that. But at the same time, I think that if you're going for representing those things, I'm not sure it's as effective as it is in movies like Grave or Howls. And just briefly with the environmentalism thing, I found that interesting as well, because I was watching and like halfway through I was like, hey, like this is a Miyazaki movie, like isn't there supposed to like environment stuff, like this feels very, and then like I got reminded, oh yeah, like in the first 5 minutes they did that thing where she got caught in the bottle and there's garbage, but like by the time you're like 80 minutes into the movie, like that was a while ago, so like I'm not sure that holds throughout the movie, just because like the way that this story goes, it's like this is more about the balance of nature, similar to Earthsea, right? Like Earthsea is like so focused on like, yeah, we got to keep the balance, and like that's how Ponyo frames it as well. So like because it kind of moves to that more like abstract feeling, like you kind of lose the humanity of connection to all this. It's more like this is just kind of like how the folklore is going.
A lot of the points you brought up are really interesting to me, because I think they're also true on the flip side. Like when you talk about Grave of the Fireflies, the tragedy of Grave of the Fireflies, obviously it's a tragedy unfolding on screen, but the tragedy is you know what's happening the entire time you're watching the film, because you know what he's doing is wrong, and you know that he is making mistake after mistake, and they both die because of it. And that is like the real tragedy, and that's why it's so heartbreaking, is because you know the whole time what's going to happen. And I think Ponyo does this also in a very similar way, because when you're like, Sasuke doesn't care that his mother is a horrible driver, but when you're watching it, you're like, oh my god, like she's like taking crazy turns, because they lead you into it, because it opens and she can't drive, and then when it starts storming, you're like, oh my god, please do not go over the bridge, and she's like, I'm going over the dry bridge, and again, it's increasingly scary and drives through all of the water. And there's several scenes, and I definitely would say some of the music plays into this, and also Sasuke's wonder. But like, I mean, there's a part where she's getting into the house, and like they literally drive under a wave. Like the wave like literally crashes over the car. It's like a little tunnel, and then they spend a long time, which I think again there's that magic. They're in the toy boat, and they saw people from the village. But then but this whole time you're like, where's Lisa? And they can see the road underwater. And there's still a very large chunk of the film where you're like, I don't know what happened to Lisa. We don't know what happened to, we do cut to the dad, but there are parts where you're like, is everyone okay? Or it's like, how eerie it is when they're like, what city is that? I don't recognize it. And like, that's not a city, it's ships. And they call it a ship graveyard.
Yeah, and that's definitely a striking visual of the movie. Like,
there's also, that's like gorgeous. And so it's interesting, like, when you're watching Grave of the Fireflies, the tragedy is that you know what's going to happen. But then they also are toying with this in Ponyo with, the world's flooded, people should be dead. And you don't really know until the end of the movie that no one died. So I think that's really like, because obviously they don't find Lisa first, but I think that's part of it. They have to cut, because you're like, if they don't cut to them being at the senior center, you're like, oh my god. And they play with you, because when they cut, you see like there's, because I think they have to cut so that you don't start bawling when they get to the park. Like, I think that's like, I do agree that they softened it, but it's still there.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job of describing the kind of suspense in the movie.
Well, I would say another thing that points to is that Ponyo is definitely a more optimistic work.
Yes,
compared. Like,
yes. Okay. So I was going to say, Alex, after what you said initially, like, is Ponyo the Miyazaki's Grave of the Fireflies? Is that what we're saying here?
So far, I haven't seen The Wind Rises, so like, I don't know what that's about. I heard there's war stuff in that, but Ponyo, it's doing the like what Delaney, working off of what Delaney was saying, like Grave, because like that the bad decision that happens, like, oh, like I know it's just gonna get worse and worse, because that's how humanity goes. Like nobody's gonna show you any sympathy. But then like on the flip side, you have Ponyo, which is like, no, we're gonna keep pushing through, and we'll find it right, we'll fix everything, and the answer presents itself in the form of this this trade off that you you give up your magic, everything will go back to normal. So like it's just like again like that's a sense of like maybe this is more focused towards kids and that like you're allowing this to happen, but also it like maybe points to like, hey, like if you work hard enough, things will eventually turn up for you and the answer will present itself and you'll be able to move forward in life. So like there's something to be said for this just being like because part of the reason it feels so bright is that that for a lot of it you feel like, okay, they're going to work this out, like this is going to turn out all right, like so I think that's a part of just like the worldview that Ponyo is presenting, and we need that more in the world. Like, so I appreciate that.
And Sosuke is so determined, which I think is a big, like, he is so determined and confident in everything that he's doing, like, and again it's also interesting. So we cut to them under the waves and we come back and they're at the tunnel. And this is kind of where, I mean, things pick up really fast right here.
Yeah.
Like when Ponyo starts changing back. And it is sad because Sasuke's afraid. And then of course, the sea wizard, Fujimoto, shows up again. And you're like, go away. You in your scary suit. Go away. And Toki's yelling and it's very stressful and he has to save Ponyo. And so like there is still like it's interesting how we play with a lot of fear in this movie. Like is Ponyo going to come back? Ponyo comes back. Oh no, she's turning back into a fish.
Fear is an interesting theme. Yeah, we can maybe see how that ties in. I think what I wanted to tie this into, which I think you guys were talking about, but this notion of Ponyo being related to Grave of the Fireflies, which is not something I expected, but thinking about it, I think there's a good comparison here because there's traumatic circumstances surrounding children at its core trying to live their normal kid life, like trying to live their normal joyful life. And I think that is true of Grave too. Like some of the most striking moments of Grave of the Fireflies are the two siblings just like having fun, like with the fireflies in the cave and stuff. So I think like for me it's like, oh, why is Ponyo, it has these apocalyptic surroundings. Like to me the joyfulness of Ponyo comes from Ponyo and Sosuke at its core. Like I found their interactions, their dynamic. It's interesting that Miyazaki kind of treats this like a romance, despite the fact that they're 5 years old, which, to me, it's not the same romantic appeal as like that I talked about with movies like Howl's or Earthsea. But it's more just the two character dynamic of and their interactions that I found so much joy from. They're two very, very joyful characters. Sosuke is so sympathetic. I didn't remember that about the movie.
He is the best boy.
He's really just the sweetest like character ever. And Ponyo is also like incredibly sympathetic and like you get her like learning how to be a human. I think all that's really like fun and just like the kind of the epitome of their dynamic, although it's throughout the movie, is when Ponyo like finally just says like learns how to speak, and like Ponyo loves Sosuke, like and Sosuke is like, oh, you're talking, and like that scene, I love that scene, and I think that just represents kind of the joyfulness I get from the two of them throughout the movie. I think that when they have to go their journey together, they get on the boat, which Ponyo like expands with magic. Them interacting with all the people they meet when they're traveling. So
the milk scene is such a weird but amazing scene.
It's a very weird scene,
but like. But it works. Like the first time I watched it, I was like, what is going on? The second time, like I really like, I mean, it's weird. Like it's this very weird fixation that they're like that because again, but it's more like, I think Ponyo just like this, and talking about life and death, I think that really ties in to all the overarching themes. Like this is Ponyo, like she's a fish. So this is a very different thing that's going on. And she's like, give the baby the soup. And she's like, the baby can't have the soup. But once she understands, and this is it's a very weird, but this is another moment of Ponyo being extremely empathetic. And I mean, and then again, both of these characters are just so kind and sweet and innocent. And she's like, oh, well, and then when she pulls out the sandwiches, which is like, great. She's like, more milk. Because she wants the baby to be happy. And she wants, it's a really sweet.
Yeah, I think another way to interpret that is that they need to show that Ponyo cares more for humanity beyond just Sosuke and Lisa. That's like the one example we get, right? Like Ponyo sees this tiny human in peril crying, and it's like, oh, like I should help them because I like humans, you know? And so like she's doing her best. So like I think that's maybe one of the reasons for the scene, because otherwise, like, I mean, I think another like thing that I like about Ponyo, like when you compare this to like Little Mermaid, right? Like the Disney version, you got Ariel like being sort of manipulated into like giving up stuff to like go be a human, and it feels very like centered on just the prince, and that's kind of it. Whereas this like feels like Ponyo has more agency in the decision. Like she like leaves and she doesn't need to give up anything. She's just like, I'm breaking out and I got help from
she's gaining a lot.
Yeah, and like it doesn't feel as it feels a little bit more expansive. I mean, it's still like I love Sosuke, and that's like the main impulse. But I do feel that the movie at least does a little bit more to be like, yeah, but like I care about other people too. Like it's not just him. So like I just feel like Ponyo does a lot better in like making me feel as if like she has more of a stake in what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm going to reference the documentary 10 Years with Hayao Miyazaki. The first 2 episodes of which Ponyo is here and Drawing What's Real feature Miyazaki working on Ponyo, and there's a lot of great stuff there. And yeah, there's the scene of him storyboarding the scene with the baby, and I do think he talks about it's the first time Ponyo like gives something to someone. Like that's an important moment for a kid, so that's kind of part of his logic. He talks about it a little bit more in there. It's kind of interesting hearing him talk, because that is a interesting scene inserted kind of into the third act climax part of the movie. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great scenes with Ponyo and Sosuke, and Ponyo, like this dynamic of her learning to be human. I think that's a big part of it too, especially when she's in the house with Lisa and Sosuke. And I do think that's maybe part of the milk stuff is like it's her just experiencing like parts of the world. I think all that's like just very joyful and really core dynamic of the movie. And then the other part in which that relates to is Ponyo, her transformation. And this is another reason I'll compare it to Howl's Moving Castle. The visual transformation of a character of Ponyo and Sophie. Ponyo goes back and forth kind of between fish, human, frog, like whatever, I don't know, like primordial fish. Like she sometimes is forced to regress back into like little tadpole form, some goes back to being human right at the end of the movie. So just the visuals of her, and I talked about this with Sophie too, but just the constant like integration of her kind of constantly changing a character design is so striking and so unusual, and seemingly so challenging to manage as you're making a movie. I found that to be like really incredible too. That's a very similar reaction to like, wow, I can't believe that she is just constantly changing in this movie. It's a similar reaction to Howl's.
Just, while we're on the topic of character design, is it a hot take that Chickenfoot Ponyo is the cutest Ponyo?
I think
that's an extremely hot
take for my taste. Yeah,
I like her three little toesies like sticking out.
Okay.
I find it to be weird.
I won't lie. Like I was a little worried about watching Ponyo. I was like, I don't want to deal with this because I love her. The in between is not great. It's not great.
I love the in between. Also, like her head is like a little bit more like square, or like when she's like Chickenfoot versus like when she turns into a human, like she like looks like everybody else. Like there's something like unique to her when she's like in that in between form that I love.
I mean, when she first does it, it's amazing. I will say I do agree with Dylan that the transformation, and I mean it's constant throughout the film, which is something I had forgotten, was that how often she has to do it, and every time she uses magic her face will shift, and it's really stunning, not like visually, and it also again it plays into that theme. And then another thing I didn't pick up on was like, one, Sasuke's a genius, but like he picks up on everything Ponyo does, which is really sweet and adorable and also just amazing. And I think another like reason why their story is so compelling. And we get to, because, he picks up on every little thing, and he does pick up on the way her face changes when she does magic. And I think, like, that's it's just, I just love it. It's cute.
So Sosuke's love of Ponyo, I definitely think it's like,
and it really, and when it ties, like, and when we get to the end of the film, and it's like, will you love Ponyo, like, even if she's a fish forever? And he's like, yeah, I'll always love Ponyo, and it feels so earned.
Yeah, I think so. And that's really at the core joy of the movie, I feel like. A few things to transition into the next topic, but quickly on Alex mentioned the environmentalism a little bit ago. I don't think we need to talk too much about it, but Ponyo stuck in the jar is an iconic early like image of the movie, and definitely like representative of this aspect of pollution. We see a scene of this like ship like navigating this like very polluted ocean, and I think that's kind of the most obvious of Miyazaki's environmental themes. Also, though, Fujimoto has a whole rant about how humans are destroying the world.
Yeah, and he's going to fix it.
We're going to bring it back to the age of the fish, the prehistoric fish age.
Important moment is when Lisa is about to murder Fujimoto because she thinks he has a weed killer. She's like, we don't use that.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
I like that scene really stuck me this time when I watched it. I was like, I love Lisa. Like, she's like, you can't use this here, and then she just like runs, like she's gonna like run him over. It's amazing.
And I kind of think it's not just the weed killer, it's just that he looks like a creepy dude
walking around.
Like, I don't think it's just the weed killer.
No, but she was like, oh, he's creepy. But I was particularly annoyed about the weed killer.
She was really irritated about the weed killer.
Yeah. I feel like that's you and Tanya, Delaney.
Absolutely. Accurate.
Like you guys, Lisa. I feel like that.
I love Lisa.
Lisa's great. Like Lisa's one of these characters that like just rolls with the punches no matter what. Like it's like, yeah, like, oh, there's a weird fish person. All right, let's just like kind of roll it. I don't understand it, but let's go with it.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's another thing I think that's really charming about this film, and it's something I get tired of. Like when I watch movies or TV shows where then they have to explain everything to somebody. Or like people being like, oh God, no, she's a fish, or being like, you're stupid, she's not a fish. The whole time, Lisa's like, I don't really understand what's going on, but yeah, okay, let's go. And then like everyone at the end of the movie is just like, oh my God, Sosuke's falling in love with a fish girl, and like the old ladies are about it. Like they are so hyped.
Yeah, it feels like a very idealized mother-son relationship, which, like, you know, I think, like, as long as it's not like because, like, with Miyazaki movies, it's not like moms are that common. It feels like it's more of, like, focusing on the kids. So, like, you know, they're like just a really nice mom. Like, I like that.
She also, like, she gets really mad at the husband, which is hilarious, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's like that's a good thing. That's a personality, too.
Watching the subs is like so funny. like it's just so funny.
The subs for the scene when Sosuke is signaling to the dad in Morse code. I love that scene. But then when Lisa's like "baka" spells out "baka."
Yeah, baka. Like it's so good. And then it's so sweet when he's like, "It's okay, mom." And he's like, well, I'm worried about Ponyo, but she's gonna come back, and so is dad. And it's just like, y'all are so cute. Like, yeah, absolutely precious. And then she's like, we're gonna eat his dinner. Let's go.
Why does Sosuke call Lisa, not mom?
Okay.
Do you know why? I honestly don't know why.
Okay, Tanya asked me this question, and she was like, why? And I was like, I don't know. But I've been thinking about it, like, all day, because I don't know why.
Okay.
I think it's because, like, I'm not saying that you're smarter for calling your mom her name, but, like, I think it has to do with, like, you know, Sosuke, like, they don't really treat
the maturity of him?
Yeah, they don't really treat Sosuke like a kid. And like I think it's just something to kind of differentiate Sosuke. And I think honestly, for some weird reason, they wanted to have a little mystery about like, because at first you're like, is this his sister? Is this his mom? Like, is this his aunt?
I'm like, is she like the adopted mom or something?
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah.
So I think it's just because I don't know, it's weird.
I think that's just a thing that like precocious kids do sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be that precocious kid.
Yeah, it's like, it's funny if I call my mom by her real name. I'll just keep doing that. And she's the kind of mom who just rolls with it. So it's just like, that's just their dynamic now. That's fine.
Well, also, I think he's not that like it's childish to call, like, I still call my parents mama and daddy. Like, I'm not upset about it. I'm 24. I don't care. But I think it's also like kind of, I'm just imagining. Basically, I'm writing Ponyo fan fiction. But anyway, so like Sosuke's so smart, and like he hears Lisa and is it Koichi, like talking to each other, and they're like, he's like, yeah. So my dad's name is Koichi and my mom's name is Lisa. So I'm gonna call them their names because it's their name. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think probably we're on the right track here, but it's a very striking element of Sosuke. I do think it plays into
it sets you up at first. You're like, are you not his mom?
Because she does look very young too, and so it's unclear, I think, what's going on. Lisa, I mean, I think she falls into in line with some previous Miyazaki parents. I mean, the thing you're tempted to compare, as we're comparing a little bit to Totoro, is the dad in Totoro is the greatest dad ever. Incredibly accepting.
But I think Lisa's better.
Lisa is not exactly like the dad, I think. Although I will say, based what forget who said this before, but I was really struck by Lisa's just acceptance and determination in the face of the unknown. That to me was Lisa's incredible quality to me. And that is true of a lot of characters in this movie. It really doesn't make sense what's going on, although they seem to have some understanding of fish with faces being a thing in this world. So maybe it's a different world. The only person who
reacts appropriately is Toki.
Yeah,
she's the only person who's
but Lisa's just rolling with the punches in an incredible way. I was struck by, you might be surprised, in Susan Napier's chapter, she talks about how Lisa is an immature parent. And how not like that's her necessary. She's not trying to present her opinion. It's she thinks that's what Miyazaki's going for. Lisa is a reckless driver. I think we see
that's
that.
Accurate.
Okay, so let me say something here. Being a reckless driver is not a sign of being an immature parent. I saw this somewhere else, which is why I'm calling this out. This is just how people drive sometimes.
Some people are bad drivers. I'm one of them. It has nothing to do with how old I am. I just suck at driving.
Well, and I think also it's just a thing of at least with my personal experience, my mom was always driving really slowly and calmly, and so when I'd get in the car of a friend who drives maybe a little faster, it's oh whoa, I gotta hold on to something. And I think that's just a difference in how people drive. That doesn't really say anything about your personality.
I mean, I think it says something about your personality, in that, not that she's an immature parent. I don't think her being bad at driving has any indication of how she is as a parent, but I think it does indicate something about her personality, which I think it does fit in. When she signals Baka 9 times at her husband, it's amazing.
That too is. I think there's some imbuing of you look at the dad in Totoro and he's just he's got it all together and very mature and I do think Lisa is strikingly different in her presentation. Personally, I interpret Lisa as a wonderful parent, a wonderful person, incredibly appealing character. I definitely don't get this negative perception of her, and I don't think it's supposed to be overall negative, I would argue, because she's portrayed really positively.
I mean, for example, when she obviously she's driving like a crazy person, but when she stops in the middle and she goes, "Did you just say a little girl fell in?" And she immediately stops the car, gets out, and she's really "Where is she?" She's not she just can't drive, y'all. She has fun. I think it's more of she enjoys driving like that.
Well,
Lisa I would say, Lisa, you have to remember the kind of Japanese norm of demeanor and parenthood, I would say, is maybe a little different than ours. And I think Lisa's supposed to be strikingly by the cuff, maybe kind of just she, even when Ponyo's there, she's just kind of running around doing stuff. And I do think it's strikingly different than some parents we've seen. But to me, it's positive. I kind of understand people interpreting her a little bit more ambiguously, I guess, as a parent.
I think this is also another thing that kind of speaks to the general optimism of this movie, in that she is so trusting of Sosuke, she believes what he's saying, and to a person who is pessimist or a realist, it's no, you can't to treat your children like that. They're gonna eventually use that against you. They're gonna take advantage of you. That's an immature parent thing to do. But the optimist says no, that's a warm and loving relationship. More parents should be like that. So I think it just kind of depends on how parenting is such a spectrum of how you can deal with this stuff.
Also, so, I think not lying. It's just
I mean that's the thing. Right now it's being proven right. So it's why should we question it? But so I think it does depend a lot on your worldview of how parents and children what that relationship should be like. So maybe I can get where the people who say it's immature are coming from, because this isn't the traditional parent, the stern parent. But I want more parents like this. I wish I had a parent like this.
Yeah, I think that was a good presentation of kind of these two perspectives, Alex. And yeah, I think they're kind of both intended. And I definitely like buy into the kind of optimism and warmth of the movie that presents Lisa in the positive light. And I think that's probably the main interpretation that you're supposed to take from her. But I think it's a very interesting character and we've been, tracking all these different like adult women in Miyazaki's movies. I think Lisa is different than any of the rest of them we've talked about and seen. She's kind of the next in line and like a completely different type of person.
Okay, am I gonna make a list? It's okay.
Capable of we've been making the list of all this, but these kind of I think she's maybe in line with these complex women, a lot of whom are villains.
I think she's in my top 5.
Like your Lady Eboshis, and there's a lot of complexity to a lot of them. I think there's complexity to Lisa, and she's maybe that in that sort of vein, but from a positive mom perspective, which I think is really interesting. I think that's an underrated aspect of Ponyo, is the presentation of Lisa. She really isn't just like a minor character either.
I think it's an underrated feature of all Miyazaki, not all, but like most Miyazaki films, is like these positive representations of parenthood, because there's a lot of animated shows and movies where it's like the parents are either non-existent or they're horrible.
Yeah, I mean, orphan characters are very common trope in a lot of things, and we do see different flavors of parents in some of these Miyazaki movies. I mean,
Well, can we talk a little bit about Fujimoto, because I think that's like the other side of parenting, right? Like it's this person who has this this duty to the ocean. Yeah, also they got like the ghost fish army or whatever. But like in general, like his job is like taking care of the ocean and stuff, and like he's got his own deal too with like trying to develop this elixir and stuff. But like in general, like once he like figures out, oh, stuff is like getting out of balance, I need to like fix this, like I need to get Ponyo back, like you can tell like he's just like an awkward, disheveled kind of dad who like doesn't really know how to communicate. And that's why like Ponyo is also like, yeah, I was taken captive, but it doesn't seem like he's ever like communicated why Ponyo is around in the first place. So like I think that this like I get the villain reading of it, but at the same time, like the vibe that I got is like this is just like a guy who's like trying to do his job and like it's like bad.
And he's a single parent to a million babies.
Yeah, like we get that there's like a there's like a dad mom relationship, but like it's kind of distance. Like he has to like make a call for her to show up. So it's like he's like doing most of this stuff on his own. So like of course like he's gonna like mess stuff up. So like I appreciated the fact, and like down to the very end where like because of just the way he is, the way he talks, like how he walks, like of course he looks creepy when he's like, yes, Sosuke, come down with us, like it'll be fine. He's like, no, like you're a weirdo. It's like no, that's just like kind of the nature of like how he looks, but like he's really trying here. Like
I think every Yu-Gi-Oh character is based off of him.
Very similar, yeah. But yeah, like his fashion sense, his striped suits he's got going on, like just his deep voice. The fact that they chose Liam Neeson to be his dub is absolutely perfect.
I didn't watch the dub. That's funny. That sounds amazing.
And it's like, the Ponyo, why very weird. But like that is kind of how I picture that dad being. He's just like he's kind of gruff, and that's why everybody's afraid of him. But like in reality, like it's not like he's actually doing evil stuff. So Fujimoto, I think, is very underrated. He probably gets a bad rap. I want to support Fujimoto here.
I don't support him.
That scene you're talking about with Sasuke at the end, I think he's in a positive light by that point. So I do think like you're like, oh, he just doesn't understand that he's trying to help at that point. I do think that's the intended reading.
It is really like Toki's like, no.
Yeah, and I'll get back to Toki, but I do think he is representative of the patriarchy that Ponyo is rebelling against for large feminist themes of the movie. I think that's an aspect of him, and the other aspect I think of Fujimoto as the main thing that I feel is interesting is I feel like he's representative of Miyazaki's disillusionment with the world. I think this is cranky Miyazaki to the extreme. Is Fujimoto.
Okay, his solution is to like drown the world.
Right, like he's like, we're done with the modern world. I'm so done with it. I just want to take it all back to how it was even before humans were here. And by the end of the movie, he learns that he can be more accepting of how things are now and more accepting of Ponyo and Sosuke. And so it's
the literal sea goddess is like, calm down.
Yeah. He's an interesting character too, but yeah. So I think that's for me. That's maybe the main aspect of him is he's like this disenfranchised person with the world who you do kind of understand, but also he does act in an antagonistic role because of that. Because it's such an optimistic movie, and we're seeing it through the lens of the people that are the kids that aren't buying into that viewpoint, and he comes around by the end.
Well, he even he hates himself. He has cast off humanity.
Yeah, I think there's probably a large aspect of that too. But yeah, his design's really interesting. Yeah, not definitely to me not as much of a fleshed out character as like Lisa, so I don't have too much more to say about Fujimoto. But I do think it's interesting. I'll say, why is he like a sea wizard? He's like, I was formerly human. Now we're getting into the types of the mythology elements that aren't super spelled out beyond that. But
okay, is rose quartz inspired by the sea goddess? I have to know.
Yeah, so we are in 2008 by this point, so it's we are like not a lot of things might have time to be based on it. I don't know the timeline of Steven Universe is probably around the beginning of when it might be conceived. But yeah, she Grand Mamare. I'll save most of the comments for the animation part, but yeah, she it's interesting that it's like, oh, here's this giant sea goddess, and that's what a weird aspect of the mythology.
It's amazing.
Ponyo is a product of this giant sea goddess and this former human cranky sea wizard.
Oh, yeah, greatest line in the movie.
Work there.
You don't need to worry about it. Greatest line in the movie is, "Oh yeah, my mom is awesome and I'm scared of her." And then Sosuke's like, "Sounds like Lisa." So good. That's relatable.
And I think one of the more feminist scenes of the movie is seeing Lisa and Grand Mamare talk in the bubble and kind of try to work things out there. Quickly on the feminism, talking about Grand Mamare and also like the older women. Here's Susan Napier on the female force of this movie. She says, it also distinctly points to a vision of the collapse of patriarchal authority already indicated by Ponyo's rebellion against her father. By this point, Ponyo has outstripped her father in magic powers and flouted his authority. Not only Ponyo, but even her tiny sisters, not to mention her awe-inspiring mother, demonstrate that it is the power of the feminine and that's the major dynamic in this film. On land, Lisa and the three old ladies also leave an indelible impression of female force in contrast to male impotence. And yeah, kind of a lot of different female perspectives in Ponyo, I think surprisingly so, maybe because I didn't remember that part of the movie as much. Like I don't remember Ponyo for its feminism as much as I do some other Miyazaki movies, but really there's just like a strikingly large amount of these female perspectives who are largely
it's literally
driving
Sosuke and the sea witch. That's it.
And Sosuke's dad, who's just like off in the ocean
really not
somewhere.
He's being useless. It's fine.
I was going to mention the dub voices, by the way, since you bring up. But I don't know why Sosuke's dad is voiced by Matt Damon in like the most minor role ever. Like, why is that?
What? That's amazing.
Lisa's Tina Fey. Okay.
This cast is like
what?
This cast is stacked.
Wait. You mean I could have watched this movie and Lisa was Tina Fey? God,
yeah.
The three old ladies: Lily Tomlin, Betty White, and Cloris Leachman. Okay.
Oh my god.
Liam Neeson, Kate Blanchett as the sea goddess, and then at the what everyone remembers this movie for though is that Ponyo is Noah Cyrus and Sosuke is Frankie Jonas.
The two rejects.
Yeah, the kids of the siblings. I don't even know, and they record a cover of the song at the ends, which is, I think, at least for our group, is like a reviled kind of cover. That now if you listen to the earlier series, I'm always like checking to make sure they didn't cover the earlier songs for Miyazaki movies. That's because of this one, because I remember them doing this cover of the Ponyo song, which is a very popular song, by the way, in Japan and maybe
it's very catchy. Banya.
Yeah,
my wife was my wife was like, I mean, the movie was okay, but it's not my favorite. And then we were literally in the kitchen, and she's been singing it all day.
It's like, I think it's like the Totoro song too.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Ooh, I don't know which one's catchier. It might be the Totoro.
I like
song.
the Totoro song, but this is
really
I vote Ponyo.
Gake no Ue no Ponyo, yeah. So that's, I mean, I didn't take an in-depth dive into Joe Hisaishi's Ponyo score. The only other thing I have to say about it is there's definitely a lot of orchestral elements to the score, which is very striking. So I'll come back to that in a second when I've been trying to transition to this animation discussion, but there's a lot of topics to quickly cover.
Do we want Ponyo, okay?
That's great. We want to finish up we'll come back to the, we've talked about the dead. Let's come back to the old ladies. Okay, let me do the transition to the animation because I was going to say earlier, we've talked about a lot of disparate elements of Ponyo, so I want to incorporate Susan Napier's framing for this movie and give my take on that as well. So she talks about how Ponyo is kind of this late style work for Miyazaki as we're later in his career. She says, in Ponyo, Miyazaki seems to be working through his life and times in a white-hot fever and a passion and intensity reminiscent of what critics such as Edward Said have called a late style, a term describing the works of an artist's final creative years. As Linda and Michael Hutchian explain, the term can be an ambiguous, even contradictory one, embracing both the extremes of rage, pessimism, and despair, and serenity, contemplation, and resignation. Ponyo encompasses both aspects. Ponyo's gorgeous hand-drawn animation suggests a serene return to childhood world, but the movie's apocalyptic themes express a deep and abiding rage against what humanity has done to the earth. As with Shakespeare's The Tempest, another late work, the movie takes us through stormy waters but ends with an expression of tranquil acceptance in its final moments as love, forgiveness, and redemption are celebrated in its climax. I like this as a framing of all these kind of contradictory elements of Ponyo. I think The Tempest is another inspiration / good thing to compare the Ponyo to. This other aspect of Ponyo is a late style work, which I think is totally true. I think if you want to look at the late works of Miyazaki, you look at Howl's, this movie, and then Wind Rises. I see Ponyo as Miyazaki's version of what Takahata has been doing before this. And at this point in where we are in the Ghibli history, Takahata hasn't made a movie in a while. But this, to me, is similar to your Pon Poko and My Neighbor the Yamadas. This is Miyazaki trying to go crazy with animation, to go all out with the animation. Similar, I think, to what Takahata hones in late on in his career. These kind of like epic, legendary animators. Like once you've told these certain types of stories, what I feel like what stands out to them is like, okay, I need to try different things with the medium itself, with the visuals itself. And I largely see Ponyo as starting, that's kind of the starting point for Miyazaki for me is Miyazaki's trying to go in a different direction with the animation. And this is detailed in large part in this documentary series I talked about, 10 Years with Hayao Miyazaki. I'm going to definitely talk a lot about what he brings up in there, but Ponyo, as we mentioned, no CGI used. That's in contrast to his three previous movies, starting with Mononoke and To Spirited Away and Howls, which do incorporate CGI in a increasing and more well integrated form. I mean, we talked about in Howls, the CG in Howls is incredibly well integrated. That movie is gorgeous. And yet Miyazaki doesn't make another movie that looks like Howls. He makes a movie that goes back to the basics. He's specifically going for a very simplistic style with Ponyo. So it starts, one thing from the documentary is Miyazaki goes to the Tate Britain Museum in the United Kingdom. He's struck by the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood artists, in particular the painting Ophelia by John Everett Millais. That's a big inspiration visually for him here. He definitely wants to go simple, a hand-drawn style. Also, animation director Katsuya Kondo is a big influence on this look of Ponyo. A lot more information here as we start to get into these later Miyazaki works, which are detailed, documented in a lot more detailed fashion. There's a great part of this documentary when Miyazaki paints this, in my opinion, the iconic image of Ponyo, which is Ponyo is here. It's Ponyo riding on top of the flock of fish in the scene Delaney talked about much earlier, which I believe is like the iconic scene of Ponyo.
I mean, it's insane that that's hand drawn. Like the way that the waves are moving and like her legs are like going at full speed, but like it's not like a blur either. Like you could like keep them all like in line there, and like later like the waves like crashing onto the road as the car, like you can feel the car moving. Like it's not like just like the background is moving, but like the car is like moving back and forth while the waves are hitting. Like there's just like so much business going on. It's like, yeah, like you.
And it's
like,
a long scene.
Yeah.
So that starts off with Ponyo going into her dad's potion vault and rides out on the goldfish, and then they become blue. And goldfish, is that why they're goldfish? I wonder. I just thought of that. But no,
Good job, Dylan.
I assume not. I don't know. But yeah, the gold and the blue, I think, are the big striking colors in these scenes. So that, and then she's like riding on top of them. And that's the point when Miyazaki draws Ponyo as here as one of the early concept images. We've talked about how Miyazaki doesn't really do traditional scripts. He does image boards. And so Ponyo's here is he'd done a lot before that, but this is when he finds the style of the movie. And you see him using pastels, which he'd never used before on this image, and stronger outlines he talks about to make it seem more simple and more elemental. Is how it's described in the documentary. But yeah, that scene is what that translates into, is her on top of the blue fish as the kind of flood begins. And then the part two is, I think we cut away and then we come back. And yeah, her riding on the fish as the car is driving. The motion in that scene is unlike anything I've ever seen. Just the dynamic motion, as I think Alex has described, in the car and the waves and
and she's jumping back and forth.
Yes, the movement of her. Those two scenes of
like the whole scene moves.
It's incredible. That's maybe the most gorgeous scene that Miyazaki's I've ever done. I do agree. Like as much as some people might want to say Ponyo doesn't live up to some other movies. This is an iconic Miyazaki scene. Like the whole parts from going onto the fish up into the riding on the fish when the car is going. Miyazaki calls it the climax of the movie, which I think we had an interesting climax that Miyazaki called in Spirited Away, but this one's even earlier in the movie too, and not like in the third act at all. But it's like, I mean, I do think this is like the best part of the movie here, and it's really incredible. The other parts of the animation, I did the backgrounds in this movie. Oh my gosh, I was so in love with them. I talked about in Earthsea, I was in love with the backgrounds. He uses different style of backgrounds. The hand drawn, colorful backgrounds were incredible to me. I want to definitely call out Miyazaki's longtime color designer, Michio Yasuda, who she's a big, not necessarily a big part of the documentary, but she's prominently featured in the documentary, as well as kind of Miyazaki's, the person, she goes with Miyazaki to these like preview screenings, which you see in there. And we've kind of vaguely mentioned a lot of like women collaborators with Miyazaki that are kind of core animators on all of these movies. At least we have Michio Yasuda here to call out specifically. But the color, I mean, I specifically here you want to reference it. The color in this movie is the greatest I've ever seen in any movie. The color in Ponyo.
Like the reds and the blues, like it's ridiculous. Like
it's a specifically colorful movie, so it's the type of movie where the color pops more. But it's, I mean, I just the backgrounds, the color, those scenes specifically. There's other scenes too. The intro is
I love the intro.
Gorgeous.
I love, like, it might be I think it might be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Ghibli like opening.
Yeah, it's to me it isn't. It's like Ponyo itself, representing Ponyo itself. Story-wise, I don't like it as much as some other things, but visually, oh my goodness, this is the best one.
Oh yeah,
visually. So I'm really floored by the intro. Visually, we talked about those riding on the fish. Ponyo is here scenes. There's a quick scene of Sosuke reuniting with Ponyo, and then this like golden rain rains down. I thought that it was incredible looking.
And also in Grandma Mare and Lisa are talking.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, that's just another, like, really,
that's really good, too. The whole bubble,
scene.
I think, is really
Yeah, the whole bubble is ridiculous.
Well, that gold raining down effect also happens when Grandma Marta is leaving, right?
Mm-hmm,
like,
yes.
And, like, Lisa's looking up, like, bye.
And then when we meet Grandma Mare, when we see Sosuke's dad with the graveyard of ships, that scene, and then her appearing for the first time, the color on the water.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. I think that's another, like, astonishing... It's not just the animation of the water, but like the colors in the water. Like, it's just, to have an entire film underwater is brave. Like,
yeah, that is true. I've seen that talked about.
And it's so gorgeous the whole time.
A striking amount of underwater and water-filled elements in this movie.
And then they just show off that they can make dinosaur fish. They're like, look, we just drew like 95 dinosaur fish.
And then they're like, oh, why do they know the names of all the prehistoric fish? I don't know the names
because
of
they're kids.
Fish.
Also because one of them's literally a fish.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, like Ponyo would know. I'm not sure how specific where his knowledge.
I guess like kids are going to be more likely to know. I
had a dinosaur phase.
Well, you learn about that type of thing in school, and then you forget it. I guess I don't know dinosaur names of the species. I don't know about prehistoric fish if I ever learned about.
Well, they live by the ocean.
They live in the ocean.
Yeah, they live by the ocean. It's fine.
Yeah. Quickly, by the way, the setting of Ponyo is based on Tomonora. which is a real city in western Japan. Miyazaki stayed there for a little while in preparation for this
Here we
movie,
go.
which just
Did he
looks
stay on the cliff?
Yeah, and then he stays there, and it's this gorgeous seaside city, and then he just floods it and destroys it in the movie.
Let's flood it.
Yeah,
okay, Miyazaki. Okay.
Let nature reclaim what it once was.
Honestly,
also, the fact that all the ships are the ocean's piled up against a mountain, what kind of nonsense?
Yeah, I mean it's I don't know if the mountain is as much in real life. I'm not sure, but yeah, it looks very similar from what I've seen. The seasideness and
okay, guys, we're gonna have to go just to confirm.
No, it's one of the places to want to go. Yeah, I think for sure. I mean we've talked about the animation in other aspects too, but and I wanted to say the Ponyo is here. Miyazaki, he's inspired by him listening to Ride of the Valkyries.
Oh yeah, no, I remember reading,
and then that translates. So then Joe Hisaishi records his own kind of inspired version of Ride of the Valkyries.
So again, I had read half of your outline, and it really stuck out to me that time, because I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. Well, that's just a one piece. This score is going way more epic than I feel like most of these movies go. It's for how colorful and soft this movie is. It feels like there's a whole orchestral epic going on with the music. So it does feel a little bit more extra than this movie needs, but that's fine.
There's a lot of movement and a lot with the water. You can the music gets really big when the water gets big, and it's really interesting. I think there are quiet moments in the film, but the music definitely takes over a lot. Because I told my wife, I was there's not a lot of talking in the beginning because there isn't
yeah.
So it's really interesting because there's a lot there is dialogue in this film, but it's definitely one of those movies that has a lot less.
Yeah, I was watching in the beginning. I was like, "Oh, is this?" I don't even remember. Is there very little dialogue in Ponyo? And there's not. There's definitely a lot, but not.
She just needs a little bit of time to learn how to talk.
when she can talk, yeah, I guess. Let's talk about the old ladies in the senior center, Toki and Yoshi, and
so great.
Toki specifically is a very interesting character. I mean, if you watch the documentary, we've been tracking who are the characters based on Miyazaki's mom, who's a very prominent figure in his life, who dies around the beginning of these Ghibli movies. And Toki, I think, is the big inspiration, Miyazaki says, is largely based on his mom later in life in this movie. And Miyazaki gets
the grumpiest one is Miyazaki's mom.
Yes, the grumpiest one. Yeah. You're shocked that Miyazaki, his grumpy self, is
very shocking. I would have never guessed.
No, Miyazaki is very emotional in the documentary, talking about Toki, and one of the last scenes he storyboards, he takes way too long to board because he can't finish it, is the scene of Sosuke jumping to Toki at the end.
What gets me is at the end when Toki's crying, hugging Sosuke. I'm like, BRB, you gotta go cry.
Yeah, I think for me, Toki works when I know that that's Miyazaki's mom. That works in a meta sense. Otherwise, though, I think it's a weirdly integrated character into the movies.
Oh, no, I love Toki. Having the grumpy old lady is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you need one person in this movie to be questioning stuff.
Yeah, so, this is weird. We need one person to be I don't buy this nonsense.
Yeah. So it's I think her, and then you see her and being able to walk at the end, and also, all of the old women.
Toki's essential to the old lady group because you have to have the balance of I'm legitimately, because then they just kind of become the chorus. Mm-hmm. So I think with Toki it adds enough personality to, because they're obviously individual characters, but they're a group. And so you have to have Toki in there for to balance everything.
Yeah, I will say I wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between the two happy old ladies. There's no difference.
Yeah, I don't know the third one is. I know Yoshi's the main one she talks to, but or he talks to, yeah. But so I think the interesting stuff with Toki being Miyazaki's mom and that being an aspect of the movie. It's my random quick other thing. The end of the movie, when Kiss the Bubble and Ponyo becomes a girl again. I think that's a really striking visual too.
That shot of Ponyo being like floating above Sasuke when she turns into a girl. I'd seen that shot before, and I always thought that was something like he was falling from the sky, but like no, it's just like she just like turns into a girl in midair for some reason.
Well, it's like he hasn't kissed her yet. She's like, hello,
he has to kiss her.
A girl, come on.
Is it weird that this is like a grand romance with 5-year-olds?
Like, I would say, like, for me, like, obviously there's intent in reading, but like when I like watch the movie, I don't read it as like this deep romance. Like to me, it's like kids just love. There's not really a difference between like when you're 5 years old, like you love your mom and you love your cat. They're about the same. Like,
and you love your best friend.
Like, yeah, like you like, and so there's definitely like. He loves Ponyo, and Ponyo loves him, and that's it. Like there's
that's how I interpret it too. It's not necessarily romantic love, just love, because the movie says love a lot, and it's a trial of love at the end.
Right, and they talk about it, and like they talk up like, and they do say romance, but like that's more for like the future, like, and because the thing is, it doesn't matter the definition when they're like, I want like, well, you love Ponyo no matter what, like regardless of like the fact that she's a fish, and he just says yes, like it doesn't matter, like you just love her, like there's not like there's nothing else.
There are references to romance, which is interesting. You know, I think it's definitely interesting that the kind of probably Miyazaki's 3 most romance infused movies are his last 3 movies here. So for some reason he's embracing that more at the end, but in here, I mean, it comes across very sweet and innocently. Just like that form of love and quote-unquote romance, yeah. I think it's really wonderful. I want to close out here with a notion interesting notion from Susan Napier, who is commenting on how Ponyo does lose her magic at the end of this movie, as is part of the deal to save the world, I guess, and become human. She says, despite its real-world references, the movie ultimately seems more of a fantasy than any previous Miyazaki film, even as it abruptly showcases an end to fantasy in Ponyo's agreeing to give up her magic and settle into an entirely human existence. This ending strongly contrasts with Kiki or Howl, in which magical characters remain in full possession of their powers at the movie's end. Perhaps it is Miyazaki who is giving up on magic, implying that humans can deal with the world in all its painful reality, with no more use for enchantment. This approach accords with a new direction in Miyazakiworld, the fact that his next film would be a historical work, The Wind Rises, in which there's little fantasy. The realistic Wind Rises contrasts powerfully with Ponyo, a movie that, until its climax, is infused in otherworldliness, from the supernatural powers of Fujimoto, Grand Mamare, and Ponyo to the fearsome natural forces of wind and waves. I guess Alex laughed because I read it in that way, but I feel like that's how it's intended to be read.
Well, also, like, it's a thing where, like, this movie is full of magic and how, like, cool it is and how important it is for the world to, like, be in that balance.
I think
like,
she talks about at the end of that quote.
Like, if you, I mean, I get the reading, but, like, at the same time, like, this feels very much in line with a lot of Ghibli movies, like Pompoko comes to mind, or like Earthsea comes to mind, where it's like there's such a focus on like humans can't be messing with magic. If you like cross the beams, bad stuff is going to happen. Stay in your lane. Let nature do its thing. Let humans do its thing, but without like messing each other up. And like this just feels like another installment of that, right? It's like, yeah, like you can be a human if you want, but don't be messing with the magic and the nature stuff if you're gonna do that. Like just commit to one side, and then you'll be fine. And like that's kind of what Ponyo is forced to do there. And she likes being a human because she has connections, she has relationships in that. She doesn't have relationships. I mean, she has her sisters, but like it seems that the relationship she has in the human world is much stronger. So like take that. So like yeah. So I personally believe. Like, the thing is, earlier we were talking about this being potentially, like, a representation of, like, being sick of humanity and all. But, like, that's why, like, it makes it so noble that Ponyo picks humanity at the end. It's like, yeah, humanity is good after all. Like, just as long as you, like, keep each other separate and, like, be respectful of each other, like, everything's gonna be fine. So, like, in that sense, like, I feel like it's almost like, yeah, like, magic is cool. Like, just like, you gotta treat it with respect. And that's I feel like, a theme that popped up a lot more in like the 90s movies, but like it's good to see it here again.
Well, I think you can. Sorry.
I was going to say, those other movies Alex referenced, not necessarily Miyazaki perspective films, and I do think this does contrast with some of his earlier ones. I do think this movie's like full of magic, but to me, this notion that Miyazaki's saying, like, you got to deal with stuff without kind of fantasy, like this transition away from fantasy is kind of interesting for Miyazaki. I feel like it's in accord with his worldview at this point. And so that's why it's kind of interesting that Ponyo is so full of fantasy. But the reading of the ending is important in its own right. Miyazaki has had some ambiguous or interesting endings, which we've talked about, and I do think this is another one in line with that is pretty different than ones we've seen before with the giving up of magic. It's
definitely a reversal, like based on my experiences with Kiki and I don't know why.
Kiki's interesting because Kiki has she can't talk to the cat anymore, but she does still have the rest of her powers. So there's some sort of loss of innocence going on there, but it doesn't seem like that's what this is. Yeah.
Well, I also think that has more to do with the cat, but like there's a lot there, but there's like I do think it is, and I don't know. It's Alex said some interesting things that have me thinking like. There is, obviously, this movie is a celebration of magic. There's a lot of magic, but it's also dangerous. It's also very powerful and not to be messed with. Mm-hmm. But there is this, what you were talking about, magic is very lonely in this movie. Like, if you want to be, like, Fujimoto is alone. Like, he has his, like, small army of baby fish, but, like, he's alone. And then he has to, like, call, and sometimes the goddess of the sea will appear. And he clearly doesn't get out much. Meanwhile, when Ponyo is like, kind of thrust into this world of, Sosuke and his mom, and they're very warm, they're very happy. And she starts, she gets to enjoy all of these things. Like, she really likes the soup. She really likes, ham. Like, all these, like, being human is very bright and, like, happy. And there's all these experiences to be had. And so it's very different than previous films with, like, where magic is, like, the good stuff. And not necessarily that magic is bad in this film, but magic is the reason for all this destruction. It's not humans this time, it's magic. So I do think it's an interesting reversal and kind of this, at the end, Ponyo does choose humanity. So I do think it's interesting. Like, granted, we also have Arietti, so like, I don't like, there's weird stuff going on,
We'll see with that one. But yeah, I think a lot of these movies reference, it's Miyazaki isn't involved with everyone. So I think it's important to keep in mind just his perspective ones here. Yeah, Alex, any closing thoughts on that or anything else from Ponyo you wanted to bring up?
Nothing from this. I think Delaney had enough there. With regards to animation, I think another thing that Ponyo is well known for is its food. Like the way that they draw that ramen with the egg and the ham on top. Like, I've seen that picture so many times. Like,
apparently you're seeing a lot more like Ponyo memes and references than I am everywhere.
A lot of memes, honestly.
I mean, I think this is just a very memed movie, and like I think it has to do with like its colorfulness, like it's like so energetic, like it's like it lends itself to that kind of stuff. But yeah, like just the way they animate food is very wonderful. I mean, that whole scene of like them like teaching Ponyo how ramen works is like, okay, you gotta like keep it the bowl on top, wait for 3 minutes for it to work, and then when you pull off and the mat, like it's kind of a magic in its own way. Like food prepares itself before your eyes. So it's just like food is should be revered. To a lesser extent, he has like a ham sandwich earlier in the movie, and Ponyo's like scarfing
the iconic part of the ham.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. All of the food is very purposeful. Like, there's Spirited Away, where there's literally so much food you don't even notice
that's the other big food movie. Yeah,
like you don't even notice it after a little bit. That is the food movie because there's so much food. But then after a little bit, it just kind of like blurs. But here, it's like we have the sandwiches, then we have the ramen. Like there are very special moments where the food appears.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we downplayed the food. I don't know.
The most important part of the movie is that Sosuke is adorable in his little sailor hat that he wears.
Yes, that's good. And it shrinks with the boat.
I know, it was tragic. I mean, the saddest part of the movie.
Matt Damon will go get him another hat. It's fine.
Oh my god!
Okay, every time Matt Damon.
Every time he wears the sailor hat, I'm like, yes.
feel like Matt Damon might play the dad though in a live action version or something.
Oh no! Well,
like a whitewashed live action
Don't
version.
say that.
that would be the choice, I guess. That's such a weird one. Anyway, I guess at this point with Miyazaki movies, you're going like all out with the cast, right? Because it's like so famous at this point. That's what we've seen here. Delaney, anything else from Ponyo you want to talk about?
No, just the sailor hat. That's it.
Okay. That was... Yes. Well, I think
I have one Liam Neeson impression more to do. Oh. Revert. Okay, there we go.
That was a good one.
That was the only scene I watched just to be like, hey, Liam Neeson's in this. Like, I should listen.
Okay, I was gonna ask if you watched the whole dub.
No. I just watched that one scene where he's talking to Ponyo in the bubble, and Ponyo's like, I love him, and it's like, oh god.
Yeah, is Ponyo 2 Fujimoto gets revenge on
I mean, what is he feeding
Ponyo gets kidnapped
olives
and Fujimoto has to go get revenge or something?
Well, I stumbled across that there was
ham too.
There was going to be Ponyo 2. Miyazaki's like, let's do Ponyo. And then it's like, no, don't do Ponyo 2. Like,
I want to hear his pitch. Like,
what would Ponyo 2 be about?
I don't remember. For some reason, there's a point when he wanted to do Porco Rosso 2 and Ponyo 2. There's some reason he wanted to do sequels.
Out of those movies.
Those would be the last two I would probably choose.
Right.
So it's a weird choice.
He really likes Porco Rosso. He really likes Ponyo. Do you think Hayao Miyazaki in real life really loves ham? Like, is that a thing? Like, he's really into pigs.
I guess ham is next to line. We've talked about pigs throughout all of his movies. Yeah, it is weird to see ham emphasized when alive pigs are so much a presence in all of his movies. But no pet pig or anything here. But I guess.
Well, why couldn't Ponyo be into pork? You know, like to make cook it up a little bit. Ham is fine and all, but like there's so much more you can do with pig.
Warm in the ramen.
Well, the
Actually,
combination
it's so hot it
works.
burns her.
Yeah. Oh, also Sleepy Ponyo, really cute.
Yes.
Like her just struggling to stay up on that boat. It's like, it's like the faces that they give her as she's like trying to stay awake is just precious. There's like so many little details with this movie that you could.
I think we've hit on a lot of them, but we could even more that we could talk about. But I'm glad we hit on all the themes that we did. I was like, what are we going to talk about with Ponyo? But we had a solid 90 minutes of Ponyo, in-depth discussion here, so I'm glad about that. Let us know what you thought of all of the topics we discussed about Ponyo. Find all the ways to get in touch at overlyanimated.com. Consider supporting us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Phonician, and thanks as always to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve, Ox, Beatrice, Hume, Michael, Needle, and Phonician. So this was our second to last Miyazaki movie as we're starting to close things out here in the Ghibli Rewatch series. As mentioned, next up is Ariete, which is another one with the one-word name main character title that also is a longer title. That is, I'm not Secret World of Ariete. I don't know if that's the official title. That's the comparison to make. Not much of a comparison, but that'll be a fun one to talk about. And then, Windrise is coming up in a few weeks as the last, as of this point, Miyazaki movie, but he is in production on one more movie, which will come out in several years. So that's it for Ponyo. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ponyo.